Back to My Garden, Episode 5.
Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
This episode of Back to My Garden brought to you by CoffeeRoyalty.com. Is it really possible to lose 5, 10, even 20 pounds or more just by changing your coffee or tea? Find out more at www.CoffeeRoyalty.com. Attention gardeners. Do you want to save time, save money, and increase your yields? Discover the secrets to an amazing garden. Receive tips, strategies, free stuff, techniques from master gardeners and experts from around the world. Join our free weekly tips newsletter at backtomygarden.com/VIP. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. Welcome to another edition of Back to My Garden. And today, buckle up, pour yourself your favorite beverage. I am so excited. Today on the show, you're going to want to grab some notes. We're going to be talking with a lady who needs no introduction, but what the heck, I'm going to do a big one for her right now. She is an author of 7 books, soon to be 8. She's one of the foremost green lifestyle authors on Amazon. She's an on-camera wild woman. She's a TEDx rock star. She blogs for Better Homes and Gardens. She is all about the living of health, culinary. If you get down to her blog, steal her martini and guacamole recipe. She's about green living, nature, and digging in the garden. Please help me welcome, broadcasting live from an undisclosed location near Chicago, Illinois, author, speaker, blogger, Ms. Shawna Coronado. Shawna, welcome to the podcast.
Woohoo! What an introduction.
I tell you, I have been telling my wife all week that I get to introduce you, get to interview you. You are about as close to being a celebrity rock star in the gardening space on social media. Most of the people that listen to this know who you are. Shawna, everybody who doesn't know you, please take a minute. We want to get to know you. Tell us a little bit about your adventures.
Well, about 5 years ago, I left the sales and marketing world that hated the corporate office. I had a cube. It was fantastic. And on my drive home, the day I left my job, my husband called me and he's like, listen, what are you going to do now? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm never going to work in a cube again. And so that began landscaping design. That was the next step I decided to take. And then that year, I did something really interesting. I built a garden out behind the fence. Since then, it's been covered on WGN News nationally and all kinds of exciting things. But it was a drought-tolerant garden. At the beginning of the garden, I took over a dozen prescriptions a day. At the end of the garden, well, it's still going on, of course, but at the end of building it, I was down to 2 prescriptions a day and felt like $1 million. And I think that's the story for everyone. I wanted to share it. It was passionate. Every time I go out back to garden, I get hugged, still to this day, 5 years later. And so that's what started off my whole story, because I wanted to write a book about it. And the first book was Gardening Nude, and it was really about green lifestyle living, not nude gardening, so disappointing. But from that point, it really springboarded me into the green lifestyle arena. I started doing primarily gardening stories everywhere I could go online. And that expanded because once you grow a kale, how do you fix it? What do you do with it? And so there are a lot of ideas. I could make a cocktail. I can cook culinary. But the more important messages were, hey, you can take this kale to your local food pantry and donate it. So over the last several years, I've grown this front lawn vegetable garden, and I donate my food every year. It's about between 120 and 150 pounds of food that end up at the local food pantry. And then my blogging and the books and everything that I do is focused on social good with gardening and organic green lifestyle living.
Did you get all that, dear listener? That when you talk about being spiritually aligned to your purpose in life and making a difference, Shawna, you seem to be in perpetual motion. You're authentically living your life, which is trying to visualize your cubicle with that little flickering fluorescent light above you, all gray and pasty and...
Exactly. Gray and pasty is a great description. I was sick. And I think that a lot of people that are working in office environments are sick. So they have health issues and emotional issues. And, we're going to doctors saying, hey, give me a pill to solve my emotional drama. But the reality is there's nothing healthier than getting out and weeding your ass off in the garden. It is a soul-changing experience once you do it consistently, and really just growing. Getting outside and smelling fresh air once in a while is a wonderful experience.
Shawna, a lot of our listeners live in apartments in major cities with one little pot on a windowsill, and that's the beginning of their garden. Describe for us how you went from the cubicle to the first season of gardening. What was that like in the very beginning?
Oh, heavens. I think that the most shocking thing was I would get out and see an area that needed a hosta. Dang it. When I was out in the garden, I'd be like, hey, I know what needs to go here. Oh, boy, I can't wait till the next exciting thing. For me, it was an artistic expression initially. I didn't think that I would end up, feeding my community or doing. It was a simple step of, hey, when I get outside, it is such a marvelous, exhilarating experience. I'm going to do it again and again. Okay. So when I started doing it again and again, I soon realized that I didn't know everything and I failed repeatedly. Like, who that's a gardener doesn't understand that, right? That it is about failure that you learn. And so I kept failing, and eventually I figured it all out. And then my readers, because I was writing about perennial gardens and flower gardens and that sort of thing in the local newspaper, and one of my followers sent me a note and said, listen, I need to grow vegetables and I don't know how. And so that was about a year into all of this that I really started growing vegetables heavily. And so now what I do is I incorporate vegetables in every flower pot you can imagine. So it is part annual, part perennial, part vegetable, each planting container that I make. So for those people that are growing on balconies, and let me tell you, I think that the majority, when you look at the millions of people that live in major cities, everyone has at least one container out there, right? Well, what if we could get people to grow more in a smaller space? And, you know that I'm working on this book. The latest book that I'm working on is a living wall book through Cool Springs Press. And I've discovered a way that you can plant between 35 and 40 plants in a little over a square foot area. So that means that urban people that have these tiny little balconies can grow a lot. They can grow pollinator gardens and vegetable gardens and passionate, beautiful gardens and aphrodisiac gardens. And oh man, the list goes on. And so getting more from where I started to getting more people to grow is the constant message. It is about social good and connecting the world to living better, helping community, and doing a better job of it if they can.
I had an outline that I want to stick to because I know we're short on time, but I'm throwing it aside because when I see the passion in your eyes light up for certain topics, like explain to the new listener who's just getting into gardening, what's a pollinator garden?
Pollinator garden. Okay, so the bees are having this giant crisis right now. We all know about the colony collapse disorder that's going on with bees. But butterflies are also having a problem. We know the monarchs are having the serious transportation problem. They're not getting to Mexico like they used to. A lot of that's tied into the way that we grow our foods, the farmers, the chemicals that we use on that. So the question becomes, how do you attract more pollinators? We want to attract more pollinators, but not because we want beautiful flowers. Here's the shocker. People don't realize this amazing connection that pollinators feed humanity. So this is about human social good. When you keep pollinators alive, you are encouraging them to do their job of helping create our food source. So that's what a pollinator garden is. It is an attracting garden that attracts bees and butterflies and other pollinators into your neighborhood or closer to an area where there's vegetables growing. And by creating what my evil master plan is, I want to create, I have to laugh evilly while I'm saying it, is to build pollinator corridors all over the world, strips of areas that are like 20 miles long that might have pollinator sources and gardens where where bees can stop and sup, that are safe and organic and don't have chemicals in them. So we have to find a way to balance that all out with our agricultural systems and what we're doing. How does a little butterfly get across a giant city like Chicago or New York? It's a sea of cement. And imagine if people had pollinator gardens on their balconies going through the cities, then that butterfly or bee has a chance of making it through the city to the other side to pollinate a giant bunch of, whatever fruits or strawberries on the other side. And I think that's the important message, is that a pollinator garden is important because we're trying to feed humanity.
For those of you driving in your car or jogging and listening to your iPad, as soon as you get in front of a computer, head over to Shawna's blog at www.Shawna Coronado. Let me spell that for you. It's SHAWNACORONADO. Shawna, you are so generous with the visual treats on your blog and social media. If you want to participate in Shawna's vision of helping the butterflies, get on her Facebook fan page, link up with her on Google+. You can follow her on Twitter. You're so active in spreading your teaching and message on social media. Have you had any surprises along the way as you've been developing your books and your blog?
Non-stop surprises. Are you crazy? I have the wackiest fan base ever. They're all nuts and I love it. I mean, they are the inspiration for me. I didn't ever, when I started all this, it was not my goal to be some big social media person. But if you want to spread a message of social good and you're only reaching 3 people, then that's not enough people. I have to have more of my peeps to help spread that message to other people as well. And so when I first started, no one would come to my blog. It was very dreary and it was miserable. And again, I failed over and over with social media. And eventually I figured out what formula works. The formula that works for me is for me just to be myself and to post up stories that are imaginative and creative in my mind. And then people seem to follow along. The biggest surprise is probably Google+. I have over 150,000 followers there, and they are very gung-ho. And, the commentary and the notes that they leave are both inspirational and dramatic sometimes. And I'm very surprised that so many people are so very passionate about where you place a garden. I think the most response I've ever received is over the front lawn vegetable garden, or that behind the fence garden. That behind the fence garden that started all this out was and improved my health and everything else, was covered in a national story from WGN News. And I received thousands of people with hate mail, thousands of people with positive statements. People got fired up over it. And I think it's amazing to me that, we can't get people to go and vote in our American elections. People don't want to vote. But man, they're certainly the first people to send me a note and tell me what they think, one way or the other, about a garden or a front lawn vegetable garden and how that affects them, what their opinions are. So I think that's probably the most surprising of all.
You've poured your soul into 7 books. Number 8 is nearly ready for birth. Which book should a new reader who's just getting into Shawna Coronado's headspace around gardening, where do they start? Which book is first?
Well, the Gardening Nude book was the first book I wrote, but it's not about gardening so much as green lifestyle living. So it's a handbook on how you can go organic, how you can live with less chemicals. It talks about being outdoors and the difference in your life because of that. I really want to say the next 2 books, I have an How to Garden in Illinois and a How to Garden in Indiana. So those are regional, that are traditionally published books. So I think that the most powerful book to read is the one that's coming out next. And so I'd highly recommend it. It is a living wall book, but it's a practical, how do I grow 40 plants in the square foot area? How do I do that? And how can I make a balcony garden absolutely brilliant? And I think this is going to be a huge thing, because people from a common sense perspective are like, well, hey, I'm just going to put a little something out on my balcony. I live in an urban city. We'll have some geraniums. I like the idea of teaching them about pollinator plants that attract, things that will help their community, or growing vegetables and herbs. Hey, you could have a cocktail garden on your balcony. What a great way to bring community to your place to hang out. It's really ultimately any of the books and the stories that I'm aimed at in the future. It's all about community and finding ways to connect people and make sure that they grow, which is what we should all be doing.
For my city dwellers who don't know their neighbors after 7 years in the same apartment or house, plant a garden. I found garden people to be different than the rest of the world, because the conversation always is, how's your garden? How's your garden? What are you growing? What are you growing? How's your garden? And then you start trading plants, and then you start trading seeds, and all of a sudden you're part of a secret society of cool people, and it all starts with a radish. So go to Shawna's blog, get signed up, and connect with her on social media when the book comes out. Is there anything more important, dear listener, than learning to grow food in a small space and controlling your food supply? Shawna, you're super swamped. You're super busy.
Yay.
What is your garden like this season?
Oh, this is an interesting year for me. Because I'm writing this book on living walls, who would have guessed it? I am doing all the photography and the writing for the book. So I have built 30 living wall gardens. So I have living walls all over my property, which is a very small property. And then I've gone to local garden centers and partnered with them as well in building the living wall. So I have I think I planted over 2,000 plants in 6 weeks. And so I'm building lots of muscle. And when you think about 2,000 plants in 6 weeks, it's like, holy cow, that's a lot. The front lawn vegetable garden is taking a slight turn this year. I have a cool design laid out that looks like a rainbow. So if you take a picture from the sky, you can see a rainbow of color. I'm resting part of the garden because I planted cabbages and kale there like 3 years in a row. And so crop rotation rules call for a bit of a rotation out. So this year I planted more flowers and less vegetables in the vegetable garden, but it's all good. We still have a huge amount of beets and kale and Swiss chard out there. So I'll definitely be donating. But this year, exciting rainbow front lawn vegetable garden. And, of course, all the living walls. Holy cow. I never imagined it would take me 6 weeks to plant up all these gardens. It's quite the challenge.
Somebody driving their car right now, Shawna, is like gripping the steering wheel, trying to imagine what 2,000 plants worth of work looks like, because they're commuting to and from the office. The same excuse, I'm too busy, or gardening is viewed as extra stress and drama, not a relief. You didn't start out that way. And you've been generously to comment that you've made mistakes along the way. Can you share with our listeners a hilarious mistake or some experiment that went tragically, hysterically wrong in your gardening adventure?
Yes, absolutely. So the worst one, the one that took us weeks to solve, I had a lovely friend give me a bunch of plants, and I just threw them in the back garden as infant plants without really paying attention to what they were. I'm like, hey, I have a space, I'm throwing it in. 2 years later, we had to pull out 200 pounds of mint out of the 200 pounds. I can't, that's bags and bags and bags and bags and bags and bags. The people that came to, I asked for some help from some friends. The people who came to help me were cursing me. We had mojitos for months. I mean, it was madness. And anyone can tell you mint in the garden is a huge mistake. I only put mint in containers now because it is dreadful. There's no denying it. And the second mistake I've made is soil. You know, the number one way to improve any plant, any garden, anywhere is to have good soil. And so, you know, for years I struggled trying to find the right combination. When I'm planting in planting containers, traditional horticulturists don't want you to drown your roots, which will happen if you have too heavy of a mix. And so they're always saying, lighten up the mix, needs extra drainage. But in the Chicagoland area where I live, it gets 100 degrees in August at minus 35 in the winter. What a change. But that 100-degree means that you're going to be watering your container plants every single day. And I don't think that that's I think it's a waste of water, and it's not going to work for me. So what I do is I combine, sometimes I do half and half where it's traditional potting soil and rotted manure. Sometimes I do a three-way combination of potting soil, rotted manure, and compost, either compost that I've made myself or an organic compost that I can find at a garden center. I mix these three together, and I use them for all my containers. For years, I used to go to the garden centers and buy these big, beautiful displays of annuals, and they're pre-potted up all together, and they look so pretty at the store, okay? Then I bring them home and hang them up, and I'm like, ta-da, I'm done. Well, in 3 weeks, they would die. And I couldn't figure out why. Well, garden centers are nurseries, and they are constantly watering, like all the time watering. So they're concerned about extreme drainage. They need really a lot of drainage. So I bring those containers home. I tear them all apart. I plant them into my soil mix that I've mixed, the manure, the potting soil, and the compost mix. And I never have another problem with them the rest of the year. And I only have to water once or twice per week. It is brilliant. And if I hadn't have failed and killed many plants to start out with, I never would have learned the lesson of proper soil and good soil for your plants.
See, dear listener, you learn more from your mistakes. I'm the guy that forgot to drill holes in the bottom of his first container, so I know all about wet roots. I'm convinced mint wasn't created on Earth, but it came on a meteorite to infect our planet. Just as a reminder, when Shawna was talking about the mint, when it comes time to get rid of that stuff, your soil has to go with it. Yes. Because it is insidious. Okay, now we're getting to the fun part of the interview, Shawna.
Yay!
It's called 5 Quick Questions. And this is where you just drop the wisdom, specially tailored for the brand new novice gardener like myself. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready. Oh, my God.
All right, let's dig in.
I'm so nervous. Oh.
Question number 1. In your experience, what do you think stops most people from starting their first garden?
Oh, they're terrified they'll fail. Bottom line. But see, in failure, we win. And so I say, go for it. Just try it. And if you fail, try something new the next year.
Yeah, practice growing weeds for a season, along with those dried brown sticks that used to be corn. All right. Question number 2. What is the best gardening advice you've ever received?
Wow, that's a hard one. I think rotted manure was the best gardening advice I ever received. That actually came from my grandmother. She had this amazing garden back in the 70s that I remember as a child would just stand out there and eat tomatoes right out of the garden. It was amazing. And she had this old barn that the sheep used to be in when they had sheep. And it was a dirt floor. And every year she would go into the old sheep barn and dig out the soil and move it to her garden. And that's rotted manure gold right there. So I think that without the lesson of rotted manure, I would have had far more failures in the garden. So it really is a genius way to organically add nutrients to your plants.
Brilliant. See, dear listener, there's 9,000 podcasts on iTunes. Where else are you going to hear about the secrets of rotting manure?
Hope it's good for the garden.
Question number 3. If you had just 2 websites to share with a beginner, what would they be?
I'm a big fan of Joe Lample. He's a buddy of mine, and I love Growing a Greener World. Specifically, when you go to their website, you can watch all the old video shows of, what their TV shows, essentially. And I think it's a great place to learn. You get a really good, consistent overview of gardening. I think the other one, there's so many of my friends that are bloggers and all that. OurLittleAcre.com is Kylie Baumley. She has this lovely little blog on how, gardening tips. But I think when you're looking at like a how-to, gardeners.com is a site that you can go and buy products and that sort of thing. But in the background, they have all kinds of stories about the people that have used their products, and they give how-tos on how to grow things. And they have videos that are interesting, and it's kind of like an off-the-traditional road sort of website that is a really nice little reference. So you have to go out and take a look at gardeners.com. Not to buy their well, you can buy their products, but I mean, for the blog part of it, it's really a nice little place to go.
For those of you driving or listening to this away from your computer, I'll have those links up in the show notes. You'll see a page dedicated to Shawna Coronado in the podcast, and just head over there for the resources. Question number 4. What's the best gardening book or resource that you can suggest that everyone should get this year?
There's too many to list.
Okay, let me change it.
Yeah, change it because it's too many.
I'm in my 3rd season. I'm just starting to get adventurous. We have 22 types of heirloom tomatoes this year. I'm getting into hot peppers. What's the best gardening book that I should read?
Don't move. I'm right here. I swear to you.
For those of you listening, Shawn is sprinting away from the camera towards her library.
Yes, and okay. I'm gonna have to go with really a fantastic. You're gonna laugh at this. It's Joe Lample again. Joe Lample wrote The Green Gardener's Guide, and why it's such an important book is because it talks about sustainability. Bottom line, how do you sustainably grow things without chemicals and without other issues that how do you treat a bug in the garden? I love the book. It is, it's several years old, but it's really a fantastic reference. And, you can tell mine is dog-eared, and I've, gotten many, many tips from him. So I would highly recommend that. You didn't ask this question, but I have to tell you, I am growing a tomato this year that is super cool. It's called the Indigo Rose tomato. And have you ever heard of it before?
No, it's a new one on me. I'm all ears. I'm taking notes.
Okay, here's the cool thing about the Indigo Rose. And they have several types. They have the plain Indigo Rose, then they have a grafted tomato that's an Indigo Rose. And it looks like it's so dark purple to be black. It is a dark, dark purple tomato, but when you slice it open, it's red. And what they're calling it is the healthiest tomato on earth. That is the phrase that I keep hearing over and over. It has special and unusual antioxidants that no other tomato has. And it's based primarily because of the color of the skin and all that. It brings the antioxidants. But the story of the Indigo Rose is fascinating, so if you can go look it up, it's really cool. I'm growing the grafted Indigo Roses from Jung Seed this year, and they are fantastic. They've been doing really well. I'm a little worried about the excessive rain we're getting, but overall, I think it's going to be this really fantastic tomato. Imagine cutting it open and taking pictures for culinary stories. That deep blackish purple. Oh, it's so cool.
For those of you playing the home game, you probably had an aha moment. Because if you listen to the podcast 2 weeks ago with Annie Haven, Annie said, you got to talk to Shawna Coronado. And here's Shawna saying, oh, you got to talk to Joe Lample. Joe's coming up as a guest on the show in 3 weeks. He's already booked.
Yay!
I want you to understand, this community, the gardening world, is one of the most generous, giving, socially oriented communities you can ever be a part of. I'm telling you, you're in the right place at the right time. There's nothing more important in the next decade or two than growing your own food. Every 8 seconds, somebody turns 60 in this country. And we're going to have a major gardening movement like you've never seen before. Wow, we're up to question number 5, Shawna. It's the last question. What is the number one thing every gardener should try to grow next year?
Oh, kale. It is without a doubt my favorite vegetable ever. And here's the reason why. Kale there's all varieties of kale. The more colorful a leaf of a plant, the more vitamins it has. And kale is so flavorful. I never ate it before until a couple years ago. No lie. And now I'm addicted. I slice it up super thin and saute it with onions, scramble it in eggs. I slice it up for salads. It makes a much more delicious salad than a traditional lettuce. Like iceberg, it has no flavor. And I use... you can use dinosaur kale, which is Toscano kale, or you can use the purple kale, which is absolutely astounding. In fact, last year, I made the front lawn vegetable garden into a giant flower. If you took a picture from outer space, it would look like this huge flower. And I used a big hunk of kale in a section of that. I'd had drought for 4 years, so whenever I grew kale, it only grew a couple feet high. Well, last year was a rainy season, and I had 6 foot tall purple kale in my front lawn flower. It was madness. It is wonderful. There's only one issue with kale, and that is they suggest you don't plant it in the same spot. I think it's up to 4 years, so 3 to 4 years, because kale really sucks the nutrition out of the soil. How I've combated that is I plant a lot of kale in containers. And so my containers are mixed with dinosaur kale this year. And, I get rid of that soil. I mix it in with my compost. And then next year I can put all new soil in. And so I don't have to worry about the kale depleting anything. It'll all be fresh. So kale is it. It is the greatest vegetable ever. There you go, guys. Dropping wisdom with Shawna Coronado. I told you this was going to be an incredible interview. The half hour has flown by. So listeners, please promise me, as soon as you get in front of a laptop, you're going to head over to www.shawnacoronado.com. You're going to follow her on Twitter and Facebook. You're going to head over to Amazon and pick up some of her books, share them with your gardening friends. Let's give the love and reciprocate. Share her stuff on social media. And I told you this was going to be great. And now, I'd love to give you the last word, Shawna. And all right. If you would just share with our listeners one little note of encouragement or some wisdom for our people who are just beginning their gardening adventure, what would it be? I think the strongest message that I share with people is to try to eat and grow organically. Heck, if you're not a gardener, I want you to eat organically. And I know that it's expensive when you look at some of the prices in the grocery stores, right? But all organic is it means chemical free. That's it. I'm concerned about the level of cancers and asthma and leukemia that we have in our society, and the food that we're eating, the crap that, seriously, we don't need to eat Hamburger Helper. You could have fresh organic potatoes and meat and make something super inexpensive and organic. I want more people to think about what kind of chemicals are they putting in their mouth. Now, in my own household, we try to choose the thing we eat the most and make that organic, because I can't afford to eat all organic either. And so we love eggs. I can't even tell you how passionate I am about eggs. I eat them every day. I would eat them twice a day. I just love them. Okay. So we realize that the food that we consume the most is eggs at home. And so we've switched to organic, because if you're going to switch one thing, it's the thing that you're eating the most. because it has more chemicals in it. You're consuming it the most. It's just common sense. So eggs have been the big switchover. The other thing, though, is, getting fresh organic kale from the grocery store and fixing yourself a salad from that instead of this cruddy iceberg in a package. It's a much better deal. And of course, the best thing ever is if you can grow the food yourself, which you can. You can grow a lot of food in a small space if you're on a balcony. And I suggest doing it. And, or rip out that front lawn. Plant an organic garden and then give some of that, plant more than you need and give some of that to your local food pantry, because of all the people, the poor people in our communities are the ones that have the toughest time finding fresh food that is organic and good for them.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's escaped the cubicle, changed her health, donated hundreds and hundreds of pounds of food to her community, and touched thousands of lives. Is it exciting or what to hear from somebody living such an authentic, spiritually aligned purpose? Shawna, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. This was so fun. I love being here.